We are meeting today at a moment of deep urgency and crisis. When we organized this event before January 3rd, our goal was to learn from the working class tenants movement in Venezuela and in the context of economic sanctions, war, and creating a new social order. We have the same goal today, along with our spirit of international solidarity, as Venezuela continues to face escalating acts of aggression by the United States. Actions that show a complete disregard for international law and the right of people to self determination. The illegal kidnapping of President Maduro and the First Lady is not an isolated act. The US has a long history of imperial intervention, acts of force aimed at control, exploitation, and access to resources, which are carried out at the expense of the working class people. So, we in the International League of People Struggle in Canada and Off the Defensive, we stand in solidarity with the Venezuelan people who are resisting these attacks and defending their land and future. ILPS is an international anti-imperialist formation with a membership of over 400 mass organizations around the world. And Off the Defensive is a national organization in Canada, and we are organizing in our neighborhoods to build collective power. We are honored to be joined by a powerful voice directly from Venezuela at the forefront of this work. Rigel Sergent is the spokesperson for the anti-eviction movement, Movimiento de Inquilinas e Inquilinos. The movement's parent organization is the Movimiento de Pobladoras y Pobladores, a combative Chavista platform for urban struggles that occupies unused urban land. Rigel Sergent has been part of the Inquilinos movement since its early days in 2004, and he is currently a member of the National Assembly of Venezuela. But before we hear from our guest, we have a short opening statement from Off the Defensive. Before we move on to the statement, for speakers, please speak at a slow pace to allow for interpretation in both the languages. And for participants, you can send your questions, comments, start discussions in either the Q&A chat box, or you should be able to send messages in the chat box. So let's begin. I'll pass it on to Ethan, who is an organizer, and he serves on the National Organizing Committee of Off the Defensive. Ethan, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Shivangi. Hello, friends and comrades. On behalf of the Organizing Committee of Off the Defensive, or Offensive Populaire, we in OTD-OP are glad to be here today with our comrades from Movimiento de Inquilinas y Inquilinos and the ILPS. Of course, we are here under the shadow of US imperialist aggression, and in these times, the need to build these connections has become even more urgent. The Trump administration has pulled the mask off US policy. After a quarter century of hostility, acts of subversion, coup attempts, and economic terrorism by successive US administrations against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, actions that have been supported by multiple Canadian governments, it should be noted, the Trump administration has finally pulled the trigger on US imperialism's ultimate design, seizing direct control of Venezuelan resources. This proves that beneath the cynical rhetoric about democracy and so-called narco-terrorism, the true motivation is and always has been a simple one. The Trump regime, like its predecessors in the White House, aims to seize the vast resources of Venezuela on behalf of monopoly capitalists. To the rich executives and senior bureaucrats who control US foreign policy, national and popular sovereignty are terrifying concepts. To them, a people laying claim to the resources of their own land is a crime, and any attempt to break from the political order dictated by Washington is viewed as a challenge to be ruthlessly attacked. All people who believe in a world beyond US-dominated capitalism should take note of this. We came together to found Off the Defensive to unite people across Canada in a common fight for working-class power in our neighborhoods, aiming at transforming small local victories into steps towards socialism. It is precisely this commitment that pushes us to stand with the people of Venezuela. If we do not stand together against US imperialism, then we are all vulnerable. Any movement fighting to break free from economic exploitation, national oppression, and U.S. hegemony will face violent retaliation exercised with impunity. If we fail to stand in solidarity with the Venezuelan people, this will amount to a triumph for the enforcers of U.S. capital. It will mean one less obstacle in the Western Hemisphere to U.S. imperialism. Already, the U.S. government, feeling that they have scored a victory by abducting President Maduro, have already publicly toyed with the idea of launching military operations in Cuba, Colombia, and anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere and beyond that catches their eye. We urge the people of Canada, our comrades, friends, co-workers, and neighbors, to stand with the Venezuelan people against this illegal and egregious assault. We urge them to resist the propaganda that is being directed against Venezuela by the crisis-racked administration in Washington. We need to reject also the Canadian government's shameful complicity in these acts. The Carney government has given its tacit support for the U.S. invading a sovereign nation and capturing its head of state. For decades, Canada's ruling class has acted more and more as a stooge of the United States. As we are seeing now, this subservience has continued even after the United States launched a trade war against Canada. As organizers fighting for working class power and socialism in Canada, OTDOP expresses our solidarity with the Venezuelan people in their struggle for self-determination and our firm opposition to US-led aggression and the complicity of the Canadian ruling class. Though conditions in Canada are vastly different from those faced by the Venezuelan people today, we nevertheless share a common interest in struggling against imperialism and capitalism. We hope that this event will be an opportunity to strengthen the ties of solidarity between us, and we look forward to learning more about the tenant movement in Venezuela and how it contributes to the larger Bolivarian political process. Most of all, however, we hope to learn how we can stand with our comrades in Venezuela during these times of crisis.
Apologies if there are certain delays. I will pause during the course of the webinar for the interpreter to translate everything to the speaker and back and forth. Thank you for your patience. So now on to the speaker. Welcome, Rigel. The first question that we have for you is, with the ongoing political and the military interventions from the United States, and the wide support from other imperialist powers, how are people in Venezuela experiencing and responding to this moment on the ground? So what is the situation on the ground?
Hola, saludos. Bueno,
Hi, everyone.
primero agradecer la solidaridad
First,
de
thank
verdad
you
eso es
for the solidarity
lo que necesitamos en este momento.
and what we need in this moment.
Entrando un poco en la
And
pregunta
answering a little bit
de
more
cómo está
on
la
the
población.
question,
Bueno,
how is the
primero nosotros
population?
venimos
First of all,
denunciando este
we are
asunto
denouncing.
que ya tenemos prácticamente una década que empezó
We
con el
have more
bloqueo
than
económico
a
y ahora
decade
se ha
on the
traducido
blockade,
en
economic
una
blockade.
invasión militar que
Now
sucedió
with this
en
invasion,
diciembre
military invasion
cuando se
in
había
January,
secuestrado, como
when
habíamos
they
denunciado el primer momento, nuestro
kidnapped
presidente
our
Nicolás Maduro y a
president,
la
Nicolas
primera,
Maduro,
primera
and the
comandante
first
como lo fue
lady.
Nucilia Flores. En un primer instante
In our
nos
first
empezamos a
instant,
movilizar
we
a
started
las
to
tempranas horas,
mobilize
a las 7 de la mañana,
from the 7 in the
prácticamente el
morning.
ataque empezó a las 2 de la mañana
And
y ya
the attack started at 2 in the morning,
comunicando entre los compañeros, entre los vecinos,
and we started communicating
lo
between
que
all of
está
us
sucediendo y a qué nivel era.
what started to happen and what level it
La
started to
vanguardia
happen.
de la revolución, los
And the
militantes,
guard,
los movimientos
the
sociales,
military, and the
los líderes,
socialist
lideresas
movement,
de
and
los
the
partidos del
leaders
Gran Polo Patriótico,
of the,
como le decimos aquí, distintos partidos de la revolución, nos
how we say
movilizamos
here, the
alrededor
different types of
del
political parties.
Palacio de Gobierno,
We started to
Las
mobilize to
Flores. Y aquí en
public
adelante
government
hemos
office.
tenido una cantidad de
From here
movilizaciones de
on,
miles y cientos de
we
miles
started to
de personas
mobilize
en las calles
thousands and
todos los
thousands of
días
people
en cada
every day,
y a
in
nivel
every
nacional.
moment, at
Ahora,
national level.
luego ya de una semana, se
Even today, after a
siente
week,
una especie de luto en las calles. La
we feel
gente
like
todavía
a
está conmovida,
sadness
algunos todavía
on the
no podemos
streets.
creer
Some
que se
people
llegue
still can't
hasta aquí,
even
aquí en el
um,
hemisferio
believe that this
occidental, aquí
happened.
en América, a ejercer
There's a
toda
sense of
esta
mourning.
fuerza militar. Hay mucha indignación por lo
There's lots of
sucedido,
indignation for what
incluso
happened,
con las personas que no son afectos a la
even those
revolución
that
bolivariana. Nosotros los primeros días
we,
fue precisamente
the
para
first days were
levantar a nuestra
precisely
gente,
to
a nuestra
uplift
dirigencia,
everybody.
y por eso también cobra importancia la solidaridad.
That's why it's
Tenemos
important to show that
desde que hemos
solidarity.
estado trabajando principalmente en la unidad,
We started
trabajar
mostly working on
con
unity,
nuestro
working
gobierno,
together.
que sigue en
Uh,
manos de la revolución, con nuestras
Even though
instituciones
our
políticas,
government is still in
con
the hands of the
la presidenta
revolution.
encargada, Delcy Rodríguez, que venía
The president that's
también,
in charge,
venía asumiendo la vicepresidencia de la República,
that she
con las
was
distintas instituciones
started to start
del
from up
Estado, la
from
Asamblea
the vice
Nacional,
president
el
position.
Ministerio Público, Fiscalía, el Tribunal Supremo de Justicia,
The,
la Defensoría del Pueblo, es decir, todas las instancias
the
estamos
different parts of the
remando
government,
junto al
we are
movimiento social,
united
al poder popular,
with the
para
with
garantizar
the
la
social
paz.
movements
Eh,
to guarantee the
Quiere
peace.
llevarnos a un escenario también donde
They
haya
also want to take
saqueos,
us
donde haya en las calles una necesidad de conmoción nacional y afortunadamente, pero también por la preparación que tenemos, no lo ha logrado. Y ahorita,
and then
aparte de
they want to
garantizar esa
create a
unidad,
sense of commotion
estamos todos trabajando
with
con
the
la
people, but
cooperación,
at this
pero
moment
también con la
they haven't been
diplomacia
able to,
en
because we've
todos
been
los
working
sentidos
together with
para poder traer de
diplomacy
regreso
in
a la
all types of the
presidenta de la
way
República y a la
to
diputada
bring.
Cilia Flores. Diría que ahorita la principal
I would say
herramienta
that
que
right
tenemos
now
es la
that
diplomacia
the
que
principal
venimos
tool that
haciendo,
we have is
la diplomacia
diplomacy,
formal, institucional,
the
que hemos
formal
buscado,
diplomacy,
interinstitucional, con los distintos
the
mecanismos
international ones
internacionales del derecho internacional, aunque
of
sabemos que estos
international
organismos
rights,
responden al
even though
poder
that we
imperialista porque es el que
know
los
that
financia,
these
pero
organizations respond to
tenemos que abrir esas
imperial
instancias.
power.
Y de la misma forma, la diplomacia
In
de
the
los
same
pueblos,
way,
la
the
diplomacia de los pueblos,
democracy
es lo
of
que
the
el
people
comandante Chávez, el que
is
continuó con
what
la
Chavez
revolución
continued with the
de hace 200
revolution
años y
of
que comenzó en el
the
año
republic
99, esta
over
revolución
200 years ago.
socialista y bolivariana, llamaba a la diplomacia de los pueblos, que es precisamente lo
He
que
was always
estamos
called for
haciendo, y
diplomacy
que
of
entre iguales
people
podamos tener
between
este
all of us that were
intercambio
equal,
para
have
presionar,
this
para tensionar
interchange
al
of
poder y lograr
pressuring
salir
those
de
in power
circunstancias como la que estamos viviendo actualmente en
and
nuestro país.
be able to leave the situation that we currently are in.
Thank you. Thank you for that, situationer, Rigel. I think a lot of us from Canada and other parts of the world, we are observing the developments in Venezuela as closely as we can and extend our deep solidarity at the moment. Just a reminder for the next question, please speak a little bit slower so for the interpretation to go smoothly. And I'll ask the next question. So with the historically, how did the tenants movement start in Venezuela? And how do you see the role of the tenant movement being a part of the broader Bolivarian revolutionary process? So how does it fit in with the Bolivarian process as well as the tenants movement, a working class movement in Venezuela?
Okay, para esta pregunta tenemos
For
una
this question,
presentación.
we have a presentation,
Comparto yo.
and I don't know if it's me that is going to share it or
I can
or
share,
you're.
we can share it on our end. Yes, there it is.
Okay. Bien.
Very good.
Bueno,
So,
un poco de cómo ha sido la lucha de las familias inquilinas en
just to
nuestro
let
país.
you know how was the struggle of the tenant families in our country. So we want to show you what is the general context of the situation of the right to housing in our country and what we call it the Fourth Republic, which was before led by a leader by the Comandante Chavez. And what is the situation? Next slide, please. Now, we started to question the model cities that we have, not only in Venezuela. This is a model of cities that is excluding, where only a few have all the rights and the vast majority who don't have. So this is reflected mostly in the south, in the different continents. So next slide. So in Venezuela, that was what we existed, and we can see that you can see this the pictures of Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, where we know that a few had all the rights and they had that privilege, and the vast majorities, we had to build a house where where the jobs were. So the people built more than 50% of the different settlements of poor neighborhoods or favelas, like in Argentina, for example. So and this is this is something that happens from Mexico to Patagonia in the big cities, and that's how the people could solve their housing situation. And here we don't speak only of private housing, but also the tenants and families mostly. And next slide, please. I was saying that during the Fourth Republic and the 90s and 80s and 80s and 90s, where they wanted to impose on us neoliberalism, not only in Venezuela, but in the whole Latin America. We had already that contradiction in the different city models and all the private sector that dominated the housing. And there were thousands of people that went out in protest that you can see in the media, in the papers in the 90s, where the people would go onto the streets to protest in the different cities of Venezuela. But there was no answer because the government did not solve or didn't defend the rights of the majority. Next slide. So we can see that at the beginning of the century, what the empire presents at that moment was George Bush, the president of the U.S. It says that the American dream, it was that everyone through the private sector could own a house, and that's what made what we called that you remember all the problems that we had in the States and in Europe with the bubble, we call it the real estate bubble. And that is the model that the empire is presenting for housing. And it's only through private sector, and which it is the business of only few, and only the people that can buy and pay can have access to housing. Next, please. In that sense, since in Latin America, we've started to build different organizations, social movements, and different coordinations in Latin America and in Venezuela, we presented like we called it the social production of habitat, and that is how people build where they could or in the different poor neighborhoods. But now we try to do it with more dignity in a planned way, and in that sense, instead of to go to the private sector as the main way of access to housing, we think that we have to develop different ways of tenure. One is a collective tenure, the right of use, and even the right of possession, and that the ownership is a right too that comes before the private property. And the Western world want this to disappear, and also the leases, the rents. That is another way of ensuring housing. Next, please. So, as I was saying, many of our organizations on international level were fighting for a new model of a city. Here we have certain examples of summits or world summits in the end of the last century and the beginning of this. All these meetings and gatherings of social movements had was all represented in the World Chart of the Right to the City, and that was recognized for a different organization from the United Nations, knowing that the house is a right, and sometimes people lose their lives for that right, and that the right to human-sized cities that are and the right to housing has been really a success from social movements. And today you can see that these multilateral organizations have this in their chart, even if they are from the imperial world. And so we talk not only the right to city, we talk about the right to habitat, because we don't have to only speak of the city or the space that are lived, but we talk about any space that can be lived, and it's not only for the human beings, but also living with all, co-living with all the different species that are in the next one. And here in Venezuela, what next? So what it was recognized by many multilateral organizations thanks to the Bolivarian revolution. With the next slide, please. And here, this conquest, these successes, is the recognition of the capacity of the people to be able to build cities, habitats, communities. And in one of the first experience were what they call the urban land committees that were born in these different people sectors. And I know we say with a lot of pride, we the tenants in Venezuela, we are the sons and daughters of this battle, this struggle with that started with Comandante Chavez and then President Maduro. We managed to have laws that defend that, and we convert a certain experience in political national policies. Next slide, please. And one of these experience, a very important one, and that is very strong in our country, is what we call the Great Housing Mission in Venezuela. And this and there was hundreds and thousands of houses that were built nationally, and was able also to do it with the people. This is a process where participate the state and even the private sector, but also the people's power. And we have now experience of self management, and where the direct control and full control of the whole process, from the construction of the habitats of housing by the people, and all this self-management process, the people take all the decisions. How are they going to be their houses? Where we're going to be? The design, the architectural design is also participatory. All that is made by the people. And if you have, of course, to hire specialized competencies, of course, it is by the people. And distribution of the housing goes also through the people. So this Venezuela Great Housing Mission is the result of the historic struggle that we've had all along of our history, not only in Venezuela, but in whole Latin America, for a social production of habitat. Next slide. In that sense, we said how we as the tenants incorporate ourselves in this struggle. In this model of city, before the tenants, we were excluded and during the Fourth Republic, as it happens in everywhere else. I think the majority of the families that are tenants are the middle class, because there are people that are working people, and but the system tried to really isolated them. So in these years of revolution, the tenure was structurally transformed thanks to the struggle, the mobilization, the organization, and the support that we receive from our government. Next slide, please. And here you have, you can see here that during the Fourth Republic, and you know that oil has been also the reason of so many wars. And in the 40s, here we have different companies, oil companies from the US. Here you can see a building that was the embassy of the US, and it was in San Bernardino in Caracas in the 50s. Now this building is a building that we took to really have the right of housing, and the oil was used basically for the economic reach. And the next slide, that meant that the tenants, we didn't have right to that. But when the Comandante Chavez arrived, and no, next, please, next slide. So we're talking about the first mobilizations with the demands of tenants that they wanted to a new legislation, less rents, lower rents, because all the laws that we had and all the system, it was responding to the economic power. Next slide. And so when Comandante Chavez came in 99, even before declaring the revolution, the Bolivarian Revolution, declared socialist before that, in the first coup, there was an economic kick where they was stopped the oil industry because they were in the hands of the capitalists. Comandante Chavez declared in 2002 that the rent is part up of a first it becomes a first necessity. So there was a freezing of the rental fees for homes built before 1987 to 2002. That means, of course, comes a counterattack of from the capital. And what happened after that, those first measures of our government at the beginning of the revolution in 2002, so there was a lot of evictions because the legislations were not. So next slide, please. So after the measure that the president took, there was that there was a lot of court orders to evict people, and so there was been many decisions to really evict thousands of people. Next slide. So that brought as a consequence that not only it wasn't going to be the government that is going to support the meeting, but as a popular power, we had to organize ourselves. And then that was the dream of the 90s with the big mobilization, as we said. We started to organize with other movements and we create the tenants associations. Next, please. I'm going to go a little bit faster. So here we started to stop the forced and arbitrary evictions. And then that in spite of the revolution, the laws of the capitalists stay there. So there was a resistance of the people on the streets fighting with these institutions and having a lot of allies in the government that allowed be able to strengthen the struggle in the street. Next, please. After that, and because of the big mobilizations that we started, we managed to have a measure for expropriation to acquire these old properties, because many of these owners were the very rich families. And here there's the Amos del Valle. Amos del Valle is a family that took the power at a certain point, and they have a great economic power in the country. But this family we have identified as owners, not they have the different buildings. The family can be about 2,000 apartments, and what they call it now the Blackstones, or that happened in Spain, and in many countries they're the same. So we managed to expropriate different buildings, and we started the process of purchasing the old building. Next. And then in the 2009, we declare the city of Caracas free of arbitrary evictions, and was a decree against eviction of tenants. It was nationalized, is enacted, and Comandante Chavez approved all kinds of policies to be able to have housing by self-management, and we had a new law of tenure, and that we did it together with the movement of tenants. Next, and that same that we managed to find to have quite many victories at the judiciary level. We put a stop to these evictions that were multiplying themselves. Next one. So the other part that I want to add is how we are organizing ourselves. We had an organization through what we call the parishes, parish-based organization, which is a land organization before the communes, as we call them. So it was not the state, It was a
organización,
municipality.
pero nos fuimos
So we
poniendo,
started to do this
siempre
organization,
para nosotros
and it has
las
been always
asambleas,
very important to have
cuando
these assemblies where
siguiente aquí,
that we take all the decision next.
esa organización
And that
nos llevó
organization
al conocimiento, como decía, al reconocimiento de las
allow us
diversas
to be
instituciones de gobierno,
recognized by the
pero
different government
también
institutions, but
económicamente
also
hubo
there
una
was
arremetida contra las acciones que
attack
nosotros queríamos
against
realizar.
all
Aquí quiero
what we
destacar,
were
por
trying to
ejemplo,
do.
que
And
la ley
here I have to
anti-eviction
say
del
that
2 de febrero
the
se
law,
derogar
the tenure law
con
that we
recolección de
we
400.000 firmas en el año
we
2008.
managed to
En aquel
have, because
entonces
we
había una diputada
collected more than
que era la que llevaba la ofensiva contra la ley
signatures. There was
esta ley
a member of the parliament
diputada en
that
aquel entonces
really
es
managed to the and
señora
this
María Corina Machado,
it's
es la
Señora
que
is María Corina
defendía o es
Machado,
la
and
que
that the
con su
ones
gobierno
that's the one that
permitió
attacked the
y la
more of
que
all these
cumplió
efforts from the
su
people,
sanción
and
de que
that's
se le cumplieron los
and
derechos.
that's the
Siguiente
the
lámina.
the women that received the Nobel Prize and that really applauded
Bien,
the
hemos tenido
aggression to
también
Venezuela. And next,
actuaciones en
so
distintas
we
épocas, como lo que fue
worked
en la pandemia,
also in
en
different
donde
moments, like during the
por
pandemic,
la situación
because of the
también
situation,
el poder económico intentaba realizar
the
asambleas y
economic
bueno, nosotros estuvimos
power
allí en esa situación
was pushing for more
colaborando
evictions.
en
So we were
articulación con
there to
las
stopping
fuerzas del
those
Estado, ¿no?
evictions, and we were
Estuvimos
helped by
alrededor de
the
7
states.
docenas de
And
asambleas
there was we stopped
los
more than
participantes o el
170
poder popular o las
evictions
instituciones del Estado
where we
para
could
garantizar
work
que no fuera
as
evicción. Siguiente.
people's power or with the help of the state. Next.
Bien, nosotros en el año
In
2022, bueno,
2022,
en los últimos años hemos
in the
tenido
last
un
years,
bloqueo económico, como decía
we
al
had
principio,
economic
y ese
blockade,
bloqueo ha afectado la situación de
as we
los
know,
vecinos.
and that really
A pesar de estar
affected the
prohibido
situation. Even
el cobro en dólares,
if
los
it was
propietarios han llevado
forbidden
de facto
to
a la
ask
organización
dollars for the rent,
el
uh,
cobro del canon de arrendamiento de los
they
alquileres
so for
y
many of the rents
ha sido una
they
forma
were
de
asking dollars.
buscar
So it was a
golpear
way
a las familias inquilinas. En Venezuela existen
to
alrededor de 5.000
really
familias inquilinas. Eso
oppress
nos llevó en el
the
año
tenant
2022
family,
a hacer una
and that
movilización
was
casi que estamos dando
that
junto al movimiento de pobladores
created
para
a huge
luchar por el
mobilization
derecho a la vivienda.
for the
Ese
right
año
to housing.
2022
And in
nos reunimos con nuestro
2022,
presidente
we met with
Nicolás
our
Maduro
president, Nicolás
en pleno
Maduro.
2011. Nos habíamos
In
reunido con el presidente Chávez
2011,
y
we met
básicamente
with
una vez
President
electo
Chavez,
logramos
and
como
10
movimiento popular
years
reunirnos
later,
con el
we
presidente
managed
Nicolás
to
Maduro,
also
el cual
meet
esa
with
reunión ayudó a
the
prohibir
President
todo tipo
Maduro,
de asamblea.
where
Siguiente.
he forbid any kind of eviction. Next.
Bien, nosotros podemos decir que en este
So we
camino,
can say
bueno,
that
hemos tenido
we, in
una dura
this
lucha
struggle, as is in many
con la
struggles, we have
administración de
victory, we have
Venezuela.
defeats, but
Eso
that's
nos
always
lleva
that's all the
a que,
case,
bueno,
always the
hemos
case with
logrado
the
completar
struggles.
la
But we
adquisición
managed
edificios.
to buy
Esta foto, por
buildings.
ejemplo,
This picture
este
here,
edificio
there is a
de
building,
Jaya, muchos años,
an old one. There
viviendo
were
allí.
people
Bueno,
were
se
living
formó
there for
aquí
20
una zona que
years,
llaman
and we
propiedad.
managed to buy it.
Esto, como ya tenemos las reglas a nuestro
And
favor,
now,
lo
because
hacemos
the
en base
legislations
a
are in
donde
our
podemos
favor,
sentar a estos
we do
propietarios
it, and we
y
can tell
negociar un precio
these,
justo
and
entre
we can
todas las
negotiate
personas por
a
adquirir un
fair
inmueble.
price so
Aquí
everybody
vemos a las
could
personas
acquire, buy
en
their
base
housing.
que es la
And here
Superintendencia Nacional de
we
Vivienda
have
que rige la
in
situación de los
here we
inquilinos,
have in
donde,
the
bueno, pudieron adquirir sus viviendas. Siguiente.
the place where they could buy the housing. Next.
Como decía, la
And as
lucha
I was
ha
saying,
sido
the
constante,
struggle
no porque
has been
seamos
a constant
gobierno,
struggle,
sino que
not because
tengamos el mismo
we have a good program of struggle and we have a government that supports us. We continue demanding and struggling. In the last year, because of the economic situation that we were going through, the owners now want a new. They accuse us like they call us invaders. They called us invaders because now we've been invaded, but they called us invaders. But that so in the legislation, they can really work around the laws, and they treat some people like invaders of housing. And you can see here the mobilizations in the streets to really denounce the situation. In the middle, we had a meeting with the judiciary to talk about this. But in spite of these contradictions that are going to be there, because we are in such a process, and then we go and at the right we have an assembly of different housing organization, and we are organizing the campaign of July 28th for the re-election of our President Maduro. And next. It is important for us, and now we're finishing. It's always to be with the grassroots, even if we are recognized, that the government recognizes. We we never abandon the struggle with the grassroots. We have to start with the people and visit the places where the people live, and to always communicate what are the actions that we are doing. And we have always taken in account the grassroots opinion. Next. And with the victory of the President Nicolás Maduro, the program of government in 2020, no, 21, sorry, it always presents big policies. One, we call them to this strategic orientation, so we call them transformation. This is a second transformation or political line, is to consolidate and to struggle for having human cities. And this is a government program, and we've done it with 1,000 of assemblies, and it was a program of President Maduro, and also was approved by the National Assembly. And this we were talk about an organic law of a housing as a human right and not a commodity. It has to be a human right, and that is, we are very proud of that because it strengthens us also as organization. And also this is a map that we have to continue struggling for their rights. Next, please. And here we are talking about the first question that was today we are January 16, so we have general assemblies every month, and this is the one that we had a week ago, where if you go to our social media and Instagram, you can see the tenants movements in Venezuela. And in that meeting, we repeated what we said on January 3rd, and here we have people from the different states that were present there. So there were people not only from with Caracas, but there were people representative of different states in Venezuela, and we approved to do everything that we can do to defend Venezuela. And we had a plan, of mobilization, and that's what has been doing next, and I think it's the last one. And this, one of the mobilizations that we had last week. So we gather different social movements here in November. We had a national gathering from the government, the party, and with our president, and we took three main decisions. The first decision was to resist an active and continue resistance because we were already expecting what was going to happen. And then it was a Congress, and that is a mobilization that we had this year. And it was the coordination of different social movements to have a constitutive movement. Here are different movements of tenants, of all kinds of organizations to denounce how what happened to our President Maduro, and we said that we cannot continue to have to struggle for right to housing, on equality of conditions. We cannot go forward without the commune, and when we said that we never abandon our land, here in the communal councils are organizations on the territory of that gather all the strength that are living there, and they form a government that make decisions that concern them. And so this is a socialist model of a territorial socialist that is based on the commune, and that's what we're going to be defending in the streets. And I think it's the last slide. So our slogan is "We want them back." That's the slogan we are fighting in the streets now. We want them back.
Thank you so much, Rigel, for placing the housing movement in a historical context, in the inspiring tenants movement and anti-eviction movement in Venezuela. And there's a lot that we can learn from it. And I think there's a lot of instances, I especially like the occupation of the old US embassy and the public actions, but I hope that we can continue the conversation and how we can learn from the Venezuelan people and how they've organized tenants. So I'll move on to the next question. Please tell us about the tenant organization, like the Movimiento de Inquilinos and Inquilinas, and the organizational structure. And what does the day-to-day organizing look like for you and the movement and the organization?
Yes, listo. Bien, decía, nosotros, Venezuela tiene 24
Venezuela has 24 states. And the tenants movement is present in 7 states. In what then do we have representatives, and we have one national representation for the coordination. But what is the most important, as we see in the pictures, are the general assemblies that we have. And that depends on the situations. The general assemblies, we have it once a month, twice a month, or once a week. The same way, every space where we are, that would be a building, a multifamily house, we have representatives, and these representatives are have a coordination with the grassroots and with the different states. And the same way as a tenants movement, we are in coordination around a common platform. This platform is formed by 5 organizations. We have the movement of the occupants or the occupancy, like in Spain and other places. And we have the same as a struggle. So they don't have a rent or a lease, but they occupy a certain, and also they are the people that do the cleaning of the buildings is mainly women, and sometimes it's elderly women that all their life have been doing the work, this domestic work, and we managed to have laws in favor of them, and we have a different neighborhood organization, and we have the pioneers camps that were able to build housing in a self-management way, as I was explaining. So they build the housing without any profit mind. And it's also it's like the cooperative movement that exists in Argentina, Brazil, and elsewhere. And we
nosotros estamos haciendo política. Más allá de la afiliación a algún partido que
to
podamos
work
estar
in
militando,
politics too.
la mayoría de
And
la vocería, si somos el Partido
the
Socialista Unido de Venezuela,
where some if a majority of us that were part of the Socialist Party, others were other not others are without a party, but we feel that we are a politicized organization, but we struggle not only for the members of our organizations, but for everyone, so they can enjoy the right for housing and the rights for the city. And as I was saying, we have created the Congress of the Social Movement, and there we have chapters, sectors, how we want to call them, on housing. And then we work with other organizations on housing, the most powerful, even quantitatively, so as it's formed by thousands of families. Those are families that organized through the Great Mission, housing mission. There are more than 1,500 lands where we're going to build this housing with a political program, and there are thousands of families that are there in public land and in private land. And with other organizations, we debate on different policies on habitat and on housing on a national level. And so our daily organization is to go to the most kind of daily or that the most close things to coordination or a much bigger level to coordinate different social movements with different platforms that we have had a coordination with. For example, I'm going to finish with this. We had certain platforms of people's social movements, so that we have also political campaigns. There, and one of them was in 2018, or we called Guarima. That Guarima was a civil conflict with the right that was attacking our country. They would kill people. They really paralyze the country, and don't create a platform of the social movement Oh, so where we had not only our movement, we have also the feminist movement, different women's movements, also movements of popular communication, also of farmers. So that experience of that coordination of so many social movements, um, uh, we managed to have go beyond the demands to a more a struggle for socialism. And so now, because of the attacks of the imperialist attacks that we are subject to, so this is our response.
Thank you, Rigel, for that comprehensive answer. That was really helpful to give us a structure of how the movement has organized itself and what are the lessons that we can learn from, and in context of the bigger state policies. The next question is just it's a question which is very relevant to us in Canada right now and other parts of the world in relation to Venezuela, which is what kind of international solidarity is the most meaningful right now? From our tenant movements, from the workers' movement, from the grassroots movements abroad, how can we express material solidarity with the Venezuelan people, both in the context of housing, but also outside of it? How do we support and what can we do?
I want to thank you for this question and come back again to thank the solidarity that we have received in these difficult moments. I think the most difficult moment in the 150 last years for us, it is very important that the different social movements have really made declarations and all the platform that you worked on, mainly in Canada. In these years, unfortunately, you are going to have Sister Blanca at another webinar. As Giovanni was saying, she couldn't come because she was in other activities. But we managed to coordinate with all the different social movements in the different stages of the revolution. Now we have, as the compañera Blanca does with the Instituto Simón Bolívar. Like 4 years ago, we had a convention of the people where many social movements and also all the sector of habitat and housing. We could coordinate many associations. This coordination is extremely important because the attacks have not finished. Telce Rodriguez, which is the president that is now, while we expect our president to come back, she's been saying that we receive daily threats, all kinds, from bombing, but also to continue all kinds of pressures on economic measures against the people. In front of the few reactions from the international institutions like the UN or the Security Council, where the veto of the US is present. So they cannot stop wars, not only for us, but what's happening in Palestine. It is very important, the mobilization of the peoples of the world. So as I say at the beginning, that the people's diplomacy for us is extremely important. It is a daily exercise that we have to do. And also the use of the technology by the imperial force, the imperialistic forces that really dominate all the networks or through which we can communicate it. It is important for us Venezuelans that and now, for example, the children that lived through the bombing and they are now being followed by a psychologist, and this trauma is going to follow. And those that lost their families and during the day, it is important that the truth comes out. And there are many things that happened, and there always are news, and there's a fake news, and there is a response that we want to give as a government and also as the street mobilization. It is important that our truth, our news, our way to communicate will be able to do it through you. I come from an event where were about 3,000 lawyers that came to Caracas. Not only, and there's some that arrive late, but we couldn't, because there was no room, because we had all kinds of lawyers, lawyers for tenants, all kinds of lawyers. And in that meeting, they said we have to make sure that our lawyers, not only in Venezuela, but also the lawyers in different social movements in the world, we are going to present communiques, press releases on all that, and they send it to all the international media. Even if it doesn't work, we have to being witnesses of how we are. It's the international law is being violated, and that is to protect the big powers and imperialistic powers. So all these press releases, all this mobilization that we can do it internationally is very important. But also, and to say it in a very strong way, it is the imperialistic forces, all the fascists, all the right wing that have been using the policy, the Venezuelans from the right wing parties have made a campaign during all these years to really cause a very wide immigration of Venezuelans in the world, even in the States, really helped the arrival of Venezuelans. Today, they're being murdered, and not only the Venezuelans, but all the Latin Americans. They've been really treated so badly, and the Asian people, African people in the States. But we can see also the attacks on Venezuelans, and we know there are people that left the country, they're saying that were persecuted politically, which it wasn't right, wasn't true. They went also for this American dream, and they repeat the lies, and they become lackeys from the empire. So we need the voices of the different social movements for those that we believe in a better world, believe in the socialism, we defend our revolution. As said, but we have to really bring the truth to the ordinary citizen, and not only to the international organization, but to ordinary people, because sometimes they call us, they ask us, and they believe everything that comes from the media. Here, with all the coordination that we are having in Latin America, many of the social movements were calling us because what they hear in their media, in their countries, it's the terrible things that are happening in our country, that we are dying of hunger, etc. So it is important that we can convey the right information and to have a direct communication with people like-minded. Then with a vision of the world that we want to build. I'm not even talking about a government. No, it's to build a better society, a better world, and that can unite us to really tell our truth. And it is important to demand and to ask freedom, to free our president and Cilia Flores, and the time is for them. It is going to be a problem for them to have their president because for the states we see already how la situación and the internal situation in the states is very problematic now, and having our president there is another problem for them. And so we need daily not to forget that we have this demand, as like the Cubans have been always talk about the 5 heroes that they were in the States, and after many years they managed to free them. So all the social movements should ask for the freedom of our president and our member of parliament. And also it is important to check the news. And I repeat that because now we are receiving so what comes from the imperialist media, they tell things that is not true. Like, for example, what happens with the oil industry when they talk about that, yes, that they were leaving 30 or 50 million barrels. The situation is not as they say, as the president in charge today said. No, we are going to do whatever it is good to bring back our president, and we are not going to negotiate our sovereignty. We are not going to become a colony. Our main tool, and Delcia Rodriguez said it yesterday in the message that she conveyed, is the diplomacy, as Bolivar did, Chavez, and our president. And now it's our turn to use this main tool, the diplomacy, politics, and mobilization. Of course, weapons, it's not our main struggle, because peace is our main objective.
Thank you, Rigel, for that answer. Very inspiring. And I think the work that we have in Canada, in our tenant movements, in our labor unions, in our neighborhoods and our community, is to defy that misinformation, the news cycle about Venezuela, and get the news directly from the people in Venezuela, similar to what we're doing today, and we hope to keep doing that as much as possible. But also political education into how to look into the imperialist acts of aggression and what can we do in Canada, and exactly how you listed out. So we don't have a lot of time left, so I can only take one question, and then we can wrap it up. 1 or 2 questions, we will see. One question I think you already answered about what's the most direct way we can support Venezuelans. The second is, what is the role of the consejos comunales in decommodifying housing? What's the role of the communes in decommodifying housing?
With this second question, the Consejo Comunal was organized on the territories. Last year, President Maduro established a way of direct government, and every month we do a people's consultation where the community decides what are their needs, what are their projects, and it's the Consejo Comunal that does it. So the experience of the great housing mission in Venezuela is a big percentage of the housing. Some is built in part by the private sector. In the last years, after the pandemic, after that, some companies left this mission because of the economic blockage. So it becomes a part of the work of the people. So the Consejo Comunal has the role to plan the habitat on the land, on the territory. The second transformation that talks about human cities in this period presents that the housing policies has to be made by the people in great percentage. First, the planning that wouldn't come from somebody, an expert, an architect, or a technician, or an organization, but it has the Consejo Comunal that plans, and also that it's the community. It is the one that is going to make that build the house, and with the pioneers campamento de pioneros, where we have a reduction of 30% of the cost, but also we break with one of the structures of the capitalism, which is the capitalist social labor division. And so here everybody helps on the management of the resources, in the idea, in the planning, in the managing, and also in the building them. The women participate, everyone. We break all of the different gender divisions and the labor divisions when the social movements, the communes participates fully or have the full control in the production and the building of housing.
Thank you, Rigel. So unfortunately, we do have to wrap up the webinar today at this stage, even though we have some questions unanswered, but hopefully there'll be more conversations with people in Venezuela. In fact, we have to wrap up early because we have another program starting right after this. So thank you so much, Rigel. So today's conversation has reminded us of something so fundamental, that what stands between imperialism, the imperial power, and exploitation is not just abstract policy. It is organized people, collective resistance, and political consciousness. What we have heard today speaks to the power of the organized people, of working class movements that continue to defend dignity and collective life under conditions of sanctions, economic warfare, and constant threat of war. So for those of us who are organizing in Canada, this discussion also comes with responsibility. Solidarity should not stop with words or today or in the moments like these. We have to translate it into political education, organizing in our communities, and concrete action to oppose imperialist aggression. So thank you everyone who joined us today, even incredible turnout. Thank you for joining us today. And we encourage you to stay connected with ILPS in Canada, ILPS Global, and Off the Defensive. If you're an individual in Canada, you can join Off the Defensive in your neighborhood, in your city. If you don't have a chapter of Off the Defensive in your city, you can reach out to us if you want to start a chapter. If you're an organization that believes in anti-imperialist organizing, then you can join the International League of People's Struggle and join other like-minded organizations so we can work together more effectively. And please note that 8 p.m. In 45 minutes from now, after this discussion, ILPS is launching a month of action in solidarity with Venezuela. You can register for it at the link which we can drop in the chat. You will continue to hear from people in Venezuela and leaders, and we will take actions. We will hold events around the world against imperialism, including here in Canada, for the next 1 month and beyond. Rigel, we will stay connected with you. Hopefully, we will keep exchanging lessons about how to organize our neighborhood. We have a lot to learn from the Venezuelan people, and we will continue to act in solidarity. So once again, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here.
Gracias. Venceremos.
Gracias, Rigel.